All right, about a 1 minute away from starting. I'm still getting used to this live stream stuff. It always seems like I'm getting cut off, and then I take a look at the replay, and the replay always seems to play right through. I know it cuts in and out a little bit, but what are you going to do? Okay, it says waiting for live stream. Okay, it should be starting at any second. It says here that I've been going for 20 seconds, so we'll see. Oh, hey Stephanie, you can see me? That may or may not be to your advantage, I don't know. This old dude's getting older. His hair's all whacked out. As a matter of fact, it's embarrassing. Since I'm writing that book, I'm writing another book that is actually due on Friday, which is why I had to kind of stop answering, hey Samuel, which is why I had to stop answering so many texts yesterday. I wrote 25 pages yesterday. I constructed, I think it was 20 tables. So today between class, Aguilay, how are you? Between class and then tonight I'll write another 25 pages in trying to get this done. So if you're taking a look at my hair, you notice my hair is kind of whack. It's because hey Marianne, I just don't have time to get it cut. And I was talking to Maria, who I guess isn't on yet, but I was talking to Maria earlier. Hey Marianne, and she was saying that evidently last week's video only lasted for 29 seconds. I took a look at it and I had, if Death had a face, Samuel, this isn't that class. This is social problems. Death had a face is human behavior. But okay, you don't upload it. Let me just actually, this question will be good for everyone, Samuel. So thanks for joining in. And I didn't want to get to business yet, but I'll get to business. I'm doing great. I'll be glad when this book is done. I'll tell you what, I'm spending like 10 hours a day trying to write this thing. It'll be about 150 pages. As a matter of fact, if you go take a look at how to write a great paper, that's how I can write 25 to 50 pages a day, is I just use the very structure that I'm giving you. Okay, this is really for everyone. And Samuel, you've actually asked a very good question. I don't know how to create Dropboxes. I don't know how to put the assignments into Blackboard. I'm sure I could learn it. However, I'm more interested in writing books. I'm more interested in doing professional coaching. I'm more interested in helping people get out of their darkness and help them elevate to a brighter day. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I do financial planning. Right, so I do financial services. And if your parents ever need any help, I'll be glad to. Hey, Cheryl. Okay, but here's what I want you to do. It's real simple. Either I would like for you to submit your paper as an attachment within the course messages. All right, that's the number one way that I'd like for you to do that, Samuel, is send it as an attachment within the course messages. That way when I go to grade it, hey Maria, nice seeing you again. That way when I go to grade it, it's already there. All right. Alternatively, I know some of us are not used to Blackboard. I'm not a big fan of online. I like it. Right now I'm actually trying to grow comfortable with it so that this fall I'll be able to use it to my advantage. However, the second way that I'd like for you to do it is I'd like for you to submit it as an email attachment, and you can send it to Shawn.hopeworks@gmail.com. Right here, I'll write that down. Look at that. Don't tell me I'm not learning something. Shawn@hopeworks@gmail.com. Even though that's for my business, you are my business. At the end of the day, I don't think I told you how long I've been teaching. As a matter of fact, you may not have heard it because the live stream cut off. But this is I started teaching in 1987 in the fall. So I'm going on to my 33 years of teaching. And I've had 18 to 20,000 students. And the one thing that I really like is the fact that I get to maintain this relationship with you all. I kind of wish this had been around. Marie and I were having a conversation here before class on the phone. And by the way, I do want to talk to you all on the phone. Right? That's something that I think is really invaluable. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking about changing some of the assignments around because we have a 5-week class. You have 2 major assignments and 3 not so major assignments. Maybe I can make some alterations on that, and I'll consider that. But one of the things I'm thinking about doing is, since all I see are some names running down the middle of my screen, I was thinking about maybe doing a Zoom call with each of you and maybe giving an auditory oral exam where we can talk through what you've learned or something like that. And I'm thinking through how I want to do that, but I think that'd be kind of fair. Oh, good, Marianne. Am I on it? Did you put me on the WhatsApp group to stay in touch? because actually I found that to be very effective, and I'll take a look at that after class. I was never a WhatsApp guy because I'm not a technology guy, right? You know, I'm the kind of guy I like to sit back and I like to talk to you face to face. I like to be in the classroom. I like to crack a lot of jokes. I get all serious on camera. Back when I used to do like TV interviews on street gangs and street gang related homicide back in Louisville, Kentucky, it used to be that I got used to being on camera, but I was a lot more serious than I am in real life. In real life, you know, I just like to joke around and stuff like that. But in any case, I'm trying to learn this, but I have learned that WhatsApp is, I don't see the link either, but that's okay. WhatsApp is very effective in the classroom setting. So for me, I like the texting part. Now yesterday, some of you texted, okay, over the weekend. I'm getting like 150 text messages and emails every day, maybe 100. And I had to sit down and work on that book because that book's going to take some time. So while I was working on that, I just took Sunday off and I come back around to it. Keep working on that link. So based upon that, I'm trying to, you know, find some new things that I can do. One of the interesting things that, let's see. Oh, thanks, Marianne. Okay. I'll take a look at that in a little bit. But one of the things I'm trying to do is integrate technology into my everyday life. When I invest in the stock market, one of the things, the way I made a lot of money in the last 3 years was, I took a look at what technology was going to replace me as a teacher. Hey, good morning, Michelle. And when I realized that artificial intelligence was going to replace me as a professor someday, I said, well, let me go ahead and invest in the very thing that's going to be my demise. Wealthy people do it. They like to seemingly, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, seemingly be in control of how we live our lives on an everyday basis. Given that, you know, let me invest in what the wealthy would invest in to control me. And in doing so, I've actually started making quite a bit of money. Just a couple things in terms of house cleaning, right? The first thing, I know I watch these videos and I see I'm always wiping my nose. There's nothing wrong with my nose. I don't have the coronavirus or anything, but I have this nervous tick where I'm always hitting my nose or hitting my ear or something like that. So, you know, forgive me for such a thing. But in any case, I went to Blackboard today, and I noticed that no one had submitted the assignment that was due yesterday, and that's okay. I'm not the type. I'm not going to worry about that. My goodness, there's real things to worry about. That we got coronavirus coming back on the rise. We have protests taking place all over the nation. I don't know if we want to use the word riots or we want to use the word rebellion, because if you think about the difference between the use of the word riot and the use of the word rebellion, it has a huge connotation, right? If we believe that nothing exists and everything is socially constructed, right? And what that means is that we have to come up with a common definition to make sense out of events. And the definition that we come up with is going to basically influence how we interpret behavior. So, if we think that what's going on around the nation is rioting behavior, right, that would assume that is chaos, that is anarchy, and basically that there's no set plan, there's no kind of forethought or what have you. But if you look at it as rebellion, that would certainly represent this idea that people have considered their stream of consciousness, they've considered their line of thought, and that they're actually acting in a rational manner. In other words, they are questioning the very power structure that keeps us under control. So is it chaotic? Is it non-rational? Or is it something that's rational and thought out? The position you take is going to have an impact on the way in which we interpret what's taking place in the United States. I ride the bus, man. I got on the bus. I'm afraid there's a coronavirus incubator, but I have my little Ohio State mask on. And I'll tell you what, I'm witnessing things changing before our very eyes. I feel some racial tension that I haven't felt probably since Rodney King, which is 1992, 1993, where African-American male got beaten by a baton 63 times. And it was the first time it was actually caught on camera, because you know the legend is that African-Americans are disproportionately the recipient of brutality, excessive force, etc. But a lot of that was in storytelling. But it was the first time back then in 1992 that it was actually caught on camera. And if you go back, here we go. I'm going to start talking now. Okay. If you remember the Who Am I exercise, I hope you watched the video. All right. If you remember listing Who Am I, and then you put it in that chart, right? The institutions up top is what creates the context. So if we take the economic institution, the political institution, if we take the education institution, family institution, media institution, those institutions are designed to meet our basic human needs. When they work together, they create this thing called society, right? So society creates the context in which we interact. Boom. That's the first thing. But the context or society creates for us the opportunity structure. From the opportunity structure emerge our social networks. From social networks, which are broad, right? You don't know everybody in your social network. And then, because they're extensive, like if you know me personally, then you have access to all the people I know. You're one handshake away, right? So if you're one handshake away, that's part of your extended network. For example, I am one handshake away from Barack Obama and Donald Trump. And simply the reason is because my best friend, when I went to high school, his sister's name was Michelle, right? And Michelle ended up going to Harvard. She went to the JFK School of Public Policy. Eric went to Columbia University. Mark, who was in our carpool, he went to Colgate. His brother Pete, he went to Dartmouth. And no, Mark went to Dartmouth. Pete went to Colgate, and Ted went to Colgate. Right? If you take a look at my carpool, Eric is the top real estate attorney in the state of Colorado. Brian, who I didn't mention, he had his own variety TV show in South Korea. Mark is the top civil engineer in the state of New Jersey. Ted became the attorney general for the state of Illinois. Hey, Annette. And Michelle was hired in the Washington, D.C. school system as the first non-African American superintendent of schools in 2009. And what she did is she came in and just cleaned house. Right? She was on the cover of Time magazine. And what's interesting about Michelle is that she was invited by Barack Obama when he was elected president to be Secretary of Education. She turned him down. Then when Trump was elected president, Trump invited her to be the Secretary of Education. And again, she turned it down. Right? So I take a look at the nature of my relationships. So I can call Michelle right now. As a matter of fact, Michelle's trying to get my book, Dear Mama, to Oprah so that we can turn it into a movie. Too late, Michelle, because I've already been given an offer to construct a movie script for Dear Mama. And as soon as it's done, I've been offered $750,000 for the rights, which I need to sit down and write that thing, right? But I got so many things going on. But in any case, what that means is if I'm connected to Michelle and she's connected to Barack Obama, I'm one handshake away, right? So what that does is that means your social networks embed you into the societal system. And then from in there, Michelle is part of my small group network, my small group influence on who I am. So if you start at society, I got to get used to this camera. You start at society, creates the opportunities, network, small group, then you, right? So what that is an institutional analysis. So if we're looking at an institutional analysis of behavior, then what we would say is that if you take a look at history that frames the context, and you take a look at Rodney King in 1992, you won't remember because most of you weren't born yet. But at that time, we were having major debates politically as to whether or not we should maintain a crime control model of policing that goes way back to the 1920s. Well, again, 1960s is really when that picked up. Or should we go to community policing, right? Well, under a crime control model, we'll worry about that in a second, Marianne. Don't worry yourself over. We'll figure that out. What was I saying? So if we go back to that context, society was debating, do we maintain a crime control model which is zero tolerance? You engage in crossing the street, we're going to arrest you. You're wearing blue, we're going to arrest you for being a Crip. You're wearing red, look at this, I got all my red gear on, I got my little blood stuff on. So if I'm a blood and I'm standing with 4 or 5 other people on the corner, then I get arrested for loitering, right? That's a crime control model. Versus a community policing model, which is where the police try to ingratiate themselves into the community context and be a part of the system, rather than the enforcer of the system. And we're going to talk about all this here in a little bit, right? So at that time, we were having debates as to which way we should go. When Rodney King gets beat down, viciously may I add, when he viciously gets beat down on, well, it wasn't live on national TV, but it came on national TV, and they played it every day, right? When it went down, people were angry. And as it got angrier, right, the call for community policing to get rid of this brutality started to really catch on. So the context, the historical context had to shift. The institutions were what they were, but the context in which people are operating changed. And when those police officers were acquitted, now I am worried. I'm going to tell you what I'm worried about. Right? When those police officers were acquitted in 1993, and all the rioting across the United States started breaking out, especially in Los Angeles, that was the tipping point. As Malcolm Gladwell calls it, when we hit that tipping point, an amazing thing happened. It was total breakdown in social order. And at that time, that's when the police department started going towards, moving towards a community-based system, right? Because now they couldn't justify the behavior, even though they were acquitted, they couldn't justify the behavior anymore. Now here's my fear. I don't know if this is your fear or not, right? I'm watching what's taking place in the United States. And our social context is a lot different than it was in 1992, right? Because we have artificial intelligence, we have robotics, we have a shifting labor force, and the nature of race relations, although it's clearly built around boundaries right now, right? We can see the boundaries are loud and clear. It's still a different dynamic. And so what we're looking at, and what my fear is that they're going to acquit these three or four police officers. I don't know. I don't have the evidence. I've seen the same video you have, and in my opinion, I don't usually voice an opinion. However, in this particular, see, I lost the chat again. Okay, since I've lost chat, if you have a comment that you want to send, write down my number. Send me a text at 305-755-2579 because I want to hear what you have to say. Again, that's my cell phone number for this class. It's 305-755-2579. My fear is they get acquitted. And unlike other periods of time, it was very clear that it was murder. He wasn't resisting arrest, not in my opinion, not as a criminologist. So based upon that, I've already started to see, because I'm a sociologist, I'm supposed to observe social behavior and interaction to understand how social institutions, including micro institutions, right? Okay, let's freeze here. A macro institution is where you have societal forces like economics, politics, family institution, shape our behavior. Micro institutions are where, look, nothing exists except what you and I create, all right? So, when I spoke to Maria today on the phone, I don't know Maria, all right? But what I know is that when Maria and I were talking, I didn't know that you guys weren't getting access to the course messages, okay? So what we had to do was we got on the phone and we kind of walked through together and came up with a common definition of how to find the syllabus for this class, right? And in doing so, what we did was, rather than being animosity, me saying, because other professors would say, well, I sent it to you, you should be able to get it, and if you didn't get it, that's on you. Nah, man, fuck. Sorry about the F-bomb. Okay. If you didn't get it, maybe it's a structural problem. Maybe I'm part of the structure. So I took a look at it and we reconstructed our discussion of reality. And then we came up with, and we found the syllabus and everything else. Tying back to that, I know none of you submitted the assignment yesterday. So I'm giving you until tomorrow night at 11:59 p.m., which is Tuesday the 9th, to submit it. It is a really easy paper. A few of you sent me text messages, asked me questions as to what you're supposed to do. It's real simple. It's real simple. What you are to do is you're to list what you think are the five most important social problems that confront us today. That's all you're supposed to do. And once you list those five, I want you to take a look at what you think are the most important underlying dynamics that affect each one of them. Okay? So, for example, right now, I think the greatest social problem that we have is our economic system. Right? I think that our economic system is basically designed towards a service economy based upon, and also an industrial economy. But we're moving into the age of artificial intelligence. So my number one problem is, what happens to your generation as we shift towards that model, right? What happens to your generation as you're displaced. And this is what I was talking about on the bus. All these people, yesterday on the bus, everyone's arguing. Like this one guy's like, I'm an African American male, let's sign a petition so that I can sue America. And another guy, African American male, says, why don't you sit down? No one wants to hear this. Bus driver's like, I'm going to kick you off. Then some other guy's going at it, but the other guy jumps in and defends this guy. Next thing you know, because I ride the bus all the time, I don't see these kind of conflicts. And it lasted for a good 20, 30 minutes. Then he got off the bus. Another guy who is a former Marine, he said, hey, you want to take it outside? Let's take it outside. But what I'm seeing is, okay, people who are similarly situated, that is, who are affected the same by the social institutions, have internalized their perspective and have started to create boundaries between one another based upon what is socially constructed. There's nothing real inherent between us. There's no inherent difference. We're all trying to make the best of our everyday life. We're trying to make the best of what we have available. And guess what happens? These conflicts emerge. Who's right, who's wrong? I don't know. And the reason I don't know who's right or who's wrong is simply for the fact all of our information, all of our knowledge is mediated information. That means it comes from another source. Okay? You can't observe all the historical forces taking place around the world. You can't know what's going on in Oregon as far as coronavirus while you're living in Miami. You can't know all the people that are affected. You can't know all the people that were unemployed. How many people are dropping out of high school for whatever reasons? You can't know what the underlying force of that is. All you get is the information that comes from a mediated source, including, by the way, your textbook. Well, not for this class, for other classes. You know, you're reading this. But even my book, Your Mom, is mediated because it's my interpretation of what happened growing up, and I'm sharing it with you. So, the media is owned by 6 companies. And those 6 companies control 94% of all information that we get at our fingertips. So, what are we doing? They show us the same exact story over and over and over again. It doesn't matter if it's Fox or if it's CNN because we're getting the same story. The interpretation is different. And then we grab the interpretation that most clearly represents what we believe. What is that? It's called selective attention. We don't question our own beliefs. We just accept our beliefs and say, yeah, that's what it is. But the fact of the matter is it could be completely wrong. But we don't have any empirical support to support our belief systems. And here's what happens. What happens is we draw these artificial lines between one another, whether it's based upon race, place, where did you grow up, where do you live, all these kind of things, right? So when we start to take a look at that, what we see is that division doesn't exist in and of itself. It exists as a social construction. Right? We come to create boundaries and treat those boundaries as real. Now here's what's amazing. Hold on. Let me take a sip of my Coke Zero. So we act as if the social constructions are somehow real. All right? They're not. But when we act like they're real, it represents our common sense. And very few, if you ever notice, what do people avoid talking about and what do they avoid engaging in? They often refuse to talk about religion, and they often refuse to talk about politics, right? Because your political perspective, your religious perspective represents your common sense. And when somebody raises an issue that makes you question your common sense, something amazing happens. You got to question yourself. And what if I'm wrong? What if I spent all my time believing that Buddha was the right God, or the right deity, then I find out the information is incorrect. Buddha wasn't the guy, right? Or I find out, Jesus was real, or I find out Jesus wasn't real. Whatever the debate is, doesn't matter. Because what happens is that once you have to question your own beliefs, you go through this process called cognitive dissonance, right? Which is where, I don't know who I am. I don't know, they gave me this information, but this is what I believe. It's got to be this. And then you start to go out and you try to find information that reinforces what you already believe. And in doing so, it reinforces the belief. But without that ability to assess with critical thinking, without critical thinking, you're a lemming. You're a follower of what the media says. You become a follower of what the political system says. That's what you're a follower of. So, when we watch what's taking place with these particular cases, with these protests in 650 cities yesterday, there were protests. Are they revolts, rebellion, or are they riots? Our interpretation is going to say something about what is really our opinion or what is our common sense on the social construction of social problems, right? So, when it comes to social problems, they do and they don't exist all at the same time. There's no other way to put it. Because if I were to ask you, right, what is a social problem? It's kind of obvious, right? It's something that is social and is a problem, right? Our education system. People want to do well, right? But there's some social problems associated with it. How can you have a system where we have the most resources on planet Earth, but our overall ranking dropped from being number 1 in the 1970s and 1980s to number 16 by the year 2010 to who knows where we are now, right? How does that happen, right? Is it because people don't care, or is it because we're not adapting to the changes that are taking place on the planet? Without adapting to those changes, we're going to be affected. And I think, personally, it's a problem. The problem isn't the people, it's the bureaucratic system that won't adapt to the change. So, when we take a look at social problems, is it an organizational issue, which is what I'm saying right now, is organized, the bureaucratic component of education is a hindrance. And that's my own personal opinion. I might be right, I might be wrong. It is what I think, for me. But I have a lot of evidence to support it. So as we shift towards artificial intelligence, we are not teaching you certain things like how to invest your money. How do you get life insurance to protect your assets, even if you're not married or have kids yet? This is the best time to get life insurance. Why? Because it protects your future. You don't know what your health is going to look like in 5 years. It's going to be less expensive now. You protect your assets as they come in, and then you always have an estate. So if you pass on in some crazy car crash on the Palmetto, you have something to pass on, even if it's just for your burial, right? Why are we teaching you how to put away 3 to 6 months of savings so if a pandemic hits, you don't have to worry about a stimulus check or you don't have to worry about an unemployment check so that you can survive? Why aren't we teaching you that, right? Why aren't we teaching you the fact that every time you use a credit card to purchase something, you're spending your future income? So if you're spending your future income at 25, 28, 36%, that means you got to work into the future to buy something that you bought today. So you're actually paying over the next, if you pay a minimum, 30 years for what you bought today. Are you serious? So in the meantime, the banks get a chance to earn money off yours because what they do is they give you 1/10% in your savings account, and then what they charge you is what, 4 or 5% for your mortgage, 15, 16% for your car, 30% for your credit card or whatever. So they're manifesting money off of your back, but giving you 1/10%. So you can never catch up. So why are we teaching you stay out of debt, put away your money, and get an 8 to 10% return in your portfolio? You start doing so at your age, roughly 18 to 25. And you start putting away $250 a month. And if you can't, you get there. You put away 50 now, right? Put away 100, whatever you can squeeze out. But if you get an 8 to 10% from the age of 25 until you're 40, right? And you put in $250 a month for 15 years. By the time you retire, you're going to have about 1.2 to $2 million. You don't have to be dependent upon the government at that point if you don't have any savings, hoping that Social Security might be there. You don't have to worry about a pension. All you've done is taking care of your own self, right? You've taken care of your own life. So why isn't our education system teaching you that? Why are we teaching you how to be an entrepreneur, right? Because if the Labor Department is correct and their projections are 30% of the jobs that exist today will not exist in 20 years. And 30% of the jobs that will exist haven't been imagined yet. How are you going to survive? Only 40% of the jobs that exist today are going to be in existence then. Do you know which ones they are? Do you have any clue which ones they are? Because if you don't, you better be entrepreneurial. So our education system isn't teaching you how to be entrepreneurial. Our education system is teaching you what? Oh, God, okay, this question here, social disorganization theory is best designed to explain what? Crime based upon individual personality, biological racism, C, community breakdown, or D, the fall of symbolic systems. C. So how'd you get C? You're trying to guess what's in my head instead of know what's in your head. The reason I give written assignments is all these assignments are designed for you to think for you. How you put yourself in the trend. And if you figure out how to put you in the trend, you never have to worry about being controlled by the system. You're going to be affected in terms of context by the institutions, but the more you take control of your entrepreneurial spirit, the more you take your passions and put them out there. And then you build every day towards your passions. You build your team around your passions. You're going to walk towards your passion. And here's the other thing. These social boundaries that make us define men and women as different, older men, younger men, middle-aged men, right? Women based upon appearance, men based upon appearance, sexuality, social class, all these constructions are meaningless. At the end of the day, what we really need to be focused on your entrepreneurial spirit, right? Break down those boundaries, because as long as you have hate out there, baby, here's where the social problems come from. As long as you have hate out there, you're always going to be affected by division, right? So instead of walking forward because here's what happens, conflict. What does conflict do? What does social conflict do? Do you realize, and think about it, if you have a job, I wish we were in class, I'd say, how many of you have a job? And probably about 75% of your hands would go up. I got one. How many of you work full time? About 40-50% of you, right? Some of you might have kids. I don't know how old you are because I can't see you, but if you have children, right? All these things. Well, if you have all that stuff going on and you go to work, do you realize 25 to 30% of all your time spent at work is talking about the conflict you have in your life, right? And much of that conflict, 25% of that conflict has to do with legal issues. What kind of legal issues are you facing, right? So we take a look at our productivity. A lot of our productivity is based upon this idea that we're in social conflict. Where does it come from? These boundaries that divide us in terms of, in mass, by race, class, etc., and by the boundaries between one another. And the boundaries between you and I, they're not inherently real. They're based upon our common sense perspective. And when we use our common sense perspective to create boundaries between one another, we got conflict. And we're not taught how to manage the conflict, right? So, coming back to the current situation. When we take a look at the current situation, I look at it from an institutional level. I also look at it from this economic level. I'm an economic determinist. I basically believe that economic systems underlie the way in which we interact with one another. I just believe that. It could be political, right? I could be a socio-political thought. I could believe that religion is first, or whatever. I can, cultural belief systems. But I tend to believe that the economic system shapes all those other institutions, right? And is a predeterminant of what kind of outcomes are going to happen. That's me. I could be wrong, but it's kind of my view on it. So when I take a look at what's happening, right, I see this economic inequality between the haves and the have-nots. And those who have the most wealth have institutional power to create the laws that affect us. And what do most of the lawmakers have? Most of the lawmakers have an elite education. Most of them come from an elite institution, many of which came from an Ivy League school, right? So you have persons from an Ivy League school creating laws that are going to affect persons in the inner city, the middle class areas, and they have an elite perspective on the law that they're creating, right? The president, are you serious? Barack Obama went to Harvard, thank you very much, right? Even Donald Trump went to Princeton. So you still have, Bill Clinton went to Georgetown, then I think he later went to Harvard for graduate school, right? So when you're taking a look at who runs the country, you're talking about an educated elite who are passing laws that affect us everyday people who never went to such an institution, right? How are you going to go to Harvard, create laws that are going to affect the people who live in Florida City, right? The rate of poverty in Florida City, because I'm just part of this book, is 43%, right? The dropout rate is 48%. High school dropout rate is 48%. Only 2% of the persons in Florida City have a bachelor's degree. So how is someone going to write a law that's going to affect the persons in Florida City when they don't understand the process that's taking place in Florida City, right? Or Homestead, or Opelika, or Liberty City, or Hialeah, or wherever you want to put it. It doesn't matter to me, right? Because what happens is that we are the ones living everyday life, you and me. And we're shaped by the context of the institutions. The institutions are controlled by human beings, right? Based upon power, wealth, perhaps, maybe not. We'll discuss that here in a little bit. But what I'm seeing is that those persons who are all economically marginalized, which is most of us, right? Because most people live within 2 paychecks away from losing everything, homelessness, right? So if most of us live 2 paychecks away, why isn't our education system teaching us how to manage our money first? Teach us how to construct a business. Teach us how to build our own personal team. Why? Because where do you go to work? 20%, what is it? 30% of the people who live in Homestead work in restaurants. How much are you making in a restaurant? 30% of the labor force, right? So when we take a look at what a social problem is, 1, I think it's economics. I think that's our biggest problem. 2, I think it's education. I think education is a massive social problem, right? 3, hate, to me, is a major problem. And as you read Dear Mama, tell you what, you better brace yourself, because that book, it's violent. And you're going to see, like you see me on this camera, I look a little washed out. I got to get some makeup or something on. I'm not vain, but dang, that's all right. You're going to see a lot of violence. And when it came to social problems, a lot of us experience social problems as personal ills, according to C. Wright Mills. C. Wright Mills wrote the book, The Sociological Imagination. He was one of my grandfathers in the academic food chain. C. Wright Mills made the argument that social problem is an issue that affects everyone, right? Racism, just because I'm a white male who has a good income, doesn't mean racism doesn't affect me. Because when I'm on the bus, you know, all of a sudden I get pointed out. I got pointed out today getting on the bus, right? Guy doesn't know me, I don't know him. But as far as we know, we're the same, right? We both love our kids. We both want what's best for our kids. We're both doing our best to survive every single day. But when you see the exterior, we use stereotypes to construct definition of what's real from what's not real, we have these artificial and capricious boundaries that build around hatred. So what I'm seeing is that we have this economic manifestation that's taking place. We have this massive shift towards artificial intelligence and robotics, outsourcing and insourcing. But everyday people, we can't figure out why we're struggling. Why am I struggling? Is it because I'm a bad person? Or maybe I'm just a normal person, right? But what happens is we start to turn my struggle as a struggle that is antagonistic to your struggle. And every time we do that, we build this social distance. That social distance, as it grows, becomes more volatile and more dangerous. And here's what I believe. We are watching on the margins the fission, the division, how's that for a word? The division that could very well lead to a complete overhaul of our social system. And I'm not supporting or not supporting Donald Trump. But if you think about sending in or threatening to send in the military, right, or what have you, instead of coming in with a conflict resolution, finding grassroots leaders, empowering them to take the microphone and supporting what they say, right? When we instead say we're willing to send in the military, and we've done it before. You weren't alive in 72. I was alive in 72. Oh my God. Okay, I was 6 years old in 72. And in 1972, we had a lot of political unrest, right? Vietnam was taking place, civil rights was taking place. There were still all kinds of isms taking place. And there were student protests at Kent State University, which is not far from where I grew up. It's in the eastern part of Ohio, and I grew up in northwest Ohio. And the National Guard was brought in. And these students were protesting. They were handing flowers to the National Guard. Next thing you know, two college students just like yourself, get shot and killed on campus. And it reverberated around the nation. How can we, on the one hand, espouse freedom of speech, the ability to think critically and to question authority, but at the same time kill persons at gunpoint for doing the very things that you're supposed to do on the American Constitution. Right? How can we do that? Is the Constitution real, or is the Constitution something that is constructed? Is the law real? You haven't read the law. You don't know what the law is, right? But you act as if you know. But when you get arrested, the police officer has to say, oh, well, that's what they did. And then they go ahead and they overcharge you, knowing that it's going to get a plea bargain, it's going to get reduced back down to what the charge should have been. But oftentimes we don't know exactly what the charge is. That's a decision that the officer has to make, and they write it down. Then the prosecutor takes a look at what was written, right? And they say, yeah, that looks about right, okay. We have a case or we don't have a case, right? The prosecutor makes a decision whether or not there's enough evidence that we can go ahead and win this case. Then the judge makes their decisions, and now all of a sudden we start to see the interpretation of law. The prosecutor and the defense are going to have different interpretations of the exact same behavior. So if behavior in and of itself is something that is clearly defined, then you don't need a legal system. You don't need a legal institution at all. But the fact that attorneys battle each other in an adversarial system so that one position comes out the winner over another position, that means the law doesn't exist, baby. Don't fool yourself. The law only exists in an interpretive process of individuals who process the facts against the law. So what does that mean? Everything is a process, right? Everything is a matter of trying to find your common sense perspective and finding evidence to support it. That's all it is. That's what social reality is, babe. The whole thing about social reality is, even in your love relationships, when you love somebody, man, this online stuff, gosh, I met my last 2 girlfriends online. Isn't that crazy? I got to think that through. But I like looking in your eyes a little bit better. Face to face. But I just happened to meet them and we got to get along or whatever. But as you fall in love with somebody, aren't you looking for evidence to support the reason why you should love them? Instead of just flowing with it? Looking for evidence. Well, they put the toothpaste cap on wrong. They snore when they sleep. They got corns on their feet. Their fingers are like this. Their breath stinks. All these different types of things. I don't like their style of dress. We look at all these things on the outside as evidence to somehow define what they are on the inside. And oftentimes what happens is people who should be our best friend, people who should be our love, end up being our enemy. Right? Why is that? Because we socially construct reality. We're constantly looking for data to support our common sense. When our common sense doesn't fit, we find data to reject it. And as long as we do that, we're always going to have social problems. Because we're always going to have hate. We may not define it as hate, but it is hate. Right? Because it's arbitrary and capricious interpretation of people who are different. And when that happens, we have inequality, structural inequality, where minority groups have higher levels of unemployment, have higher levels of high school dropout, have higher levels of diabetes, have higher levels of, whatever. And why is that? Is it inherent in race, or is it inherent in ethnicity, or is it inherent in the social system that is constructed based upon boundaries and common sense? Right? Hold on a second, I need to take another sip. And my chat's not working. Let me see if you're sending me any messages. Where are my glasses? I can't see this without some glasses on. No messages. Okay. I see some of you have emailed in your assignment. I appreciate that. So, where was I? Oh. So what that means is you can turn in your first paper tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. because I'm not holding you accountable for something that probably was my mistake. 2, I'm going to make a couple of adjustments with the syllabus moving forward. I don't know which way they're going to be, but they'll definitely be in your favor. It's not going to be more of a burden for you. One thing that I want to do for next Sunday, which is when your next paper is due. Whew, man, it's hot in here. I'll pull it off. Dang, look at that. Oh my God, that dome is jacked, boy. I don't wear a hat in class, but man, with the light and stuff, I have it looks horrible having the reflection of light. Bald one, it's one thing to be bald, but then to have the reflection, oh gosh, I feel like a freaking rearview mirror. But anyhow, what I'm thinking about doing for next Sunday is, rather than you just taking what you think from that list as the most important social problem, what I'd really like for you to do, because instead of me doing a live stream video on Wednesday, I'd like for you to use that time to watch an actual movie, all right? A real life movie. And then what I want you to do is I want you to pick the most important social problem in that movie, all right? And when you pick that most important social problem, for example, I love to watch the movie Freedom Riders. I use it in my class. I use it in human behavior. You can use it here, it's fine. But there's a million other movies. But as far as when I take a look at Freedom Riders, the number one there's 2 or 3 social problems. There's gun violence. That's a part of it. That's a social problem, right? Another social problem would be race relations, ethnicity relations, gender relations, education, social class. So when I watch that movie, there's several types of social problems that exist within that movie, right? So what I wouldn't mind you doing, and I think I'll articulate this on Billboard, thinking about music. I'm thinking about Prince because his birthday was yesterday. I'm a little bit distraught about that. But what I'm thinking about doing on Blackboard is just kind of revising the assignment a little bit. You pick the most important movie from you pick the most important social problem from the movie, and you write about it. But here's what I want you to do. I know that I gave you some theories and some terminology that I wanted you to look up over the weekend. Now, you don't have to turn that in, all right? But as you get to the midterm exam, or let me rephrase, as you get to the term paper that's due next Sunday, which I'm not modifying, or the final exam that is due in week 5, right? You're going to have to integrate some of this terminology that you're looking up along the way. And so what I'm going to do is, I think that for next Sunday, I'm going to have you watch a movie, and then you're going to pick the theory that you think is best, right, to explain that movie. And you're going to pick one social problem. So, for example, in Freedom Riders, I picked gun violence. I picked gun violence as what I thought was the biggest social problem. And here's what you do. If you go back and watch How to Write a Great Paper, I think I put the link in your class today. If you watch that link again, all right, you will always want to start your paper with an introduction, have a background to the topic, and a background could be the trends in gun control, the trends in gun violence. What are the political pundits saying about firearms, whatever it is, right? So you have a background, excuse me. Then you put down your theory, right? And then you collect some data to support the theory. Then you have your analysis, and you draw conclusions. So you always want to have introduction, background, theory, data, analysis, conclusions. Every paper you write. So Maria, you and I were talking earlier. If you make that habit, and you put it in boldface headings, and you start the section. Introduction, then you write your introduction paragraph, as I informed how to do in How to Write a Great Paper. Then you put your background, however you take it. It could be literature background, here's what the research says, or it could be, here are the trends, whatever. You figure out what the background is pertinent to your paper. Then pick the proper theory, then you supply some data, systematic data to support or refute an evidence. Then you analyze it, and when you analyze it, what you're doing is you're taking the theory that you developed to interpret the data, right? Because, let me put on some glasses. Got all these wrinkles down here, man. God, now I'm going to show you a video of what I looked like when I was like in my 20s, man. You'll be like, but anyhow, so when we take a look at it, you're looking at this particular topic. You're framing it, you're using concepts, and those terms that I give you to look up, those are concepts, right? So you use your concepts to explain this particular topic. That's about it, right? Make it about 2 pages long, and it shouldn't be a horrible scenario to draw up 2 pages, right? And then, here's what I was trying to say. Because what you're doing at this point in time, and I wish we were live because I could really, there's certain things I can do in a live classroom to kind of address myths and stuff like that. But you all have beliefs that you come into this room with, into this class with, right? It still feels kind of like a room. You come to this class with certain kind of preconceived ideas about social problems and what's the root of them. You might be right and you might be wrong. You're probably both. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at a theory: conflict theory, functionalist theory, or symbolic interaction. I'll repeat them: conflict theory, functionalism, and it's on your sheet so I don't have to worry about writing it out, or symbolic interaction, right? The theory that you choose, now the reason why we do theory is this. A theory has three purposes. I never know where this camera is. It has three purposes. One, it helps us to understand a behavior or a pattern of behavior. Two, it helps us explain it, right? And three, it helps us to interpret what we see. So let me just give you a quick, brief overview on theories that are that we have in this class. And next time, whenever that is, I guess next Monday, unless I call for you to have a brief meeting or a Zoom or something like that. Or if you have questions for me because you don't understand what you looked up, then you can text me and we can make a time to talk on the phone or Zoom or something like that. Because I would like to meet you all. I mean, if we were in class, we'd meet. We'd have our own handshake and stuff like that. By the way, if you ever see me in real life, you can do this. Put your two fingers down and just do like this. Because it really means this. It means this, but it means this. My daughter, when she was 2, she used to try to be like her mom, and her mom would, kind of engage in little disputes when she was driving. She might throw the finger out there or something like that. So my daughter, who was 2, she couldn't do this. So she would do it like this. She'd put her 2 fingers down and she'd go like that. That was her way of doing it. So what I started doing, when I walk in the classroom, I say, "Hey everybody, good evening, good morning," and we do this. Next thing you know, everyone in class, when I walk in, they're doing like this. So if I ever meet you face to face and you do this, that means we're a part of the same class. Kind of stupid, ridiculous. But actually it's not. Because what it does, using symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interactionism is a micro-perspective. And this micro-theory assumes that we socially construct what is real. We come up with alternate lines of behavior, alternate lines of interpretation, and we negotiate what is real. We negotiate which symbolic structure we're going to believe in and we're going to react to. Right? And the reason we do that is because when we are constructing reality, we're trying to fit in. Our whole life is spent basically, right, trying to fit in with others, trying to find the right person to love because we want to have someone who we're compatible with that we can fit in together. Right? To have a workplace where we fit in, where we can feel comfortable because we don't like to be questioned. We like to have people surround us that are similarly situated, that have similar types of belief systems. Why? Because we like ourself. We want the self to understand and feel comfortable in the world. So all of our life is an attempt to construct our social self. That's symbolic interactionism. Our self is a premise of how other people see us. We imagine what other people see, then we act as if their imagination is true. It's called the looking glass self, right? Our identity is how we understand our personal attributes. We spend our whole life trying to align our identity, how we see ourselves, with the self that we present to others. And when we do that, we create homeostasis. In other words, we create peace within our life. And our whole life is spent doing that. As you get older and your life cycle changes, the nature of your relationships change, what's amazing is that your sense of self is going to change, and so will your identity. You're not the same person. You are a continuous flow. If you go watch that film, Who Am I? Last week's lecture. We are a continuous outcome of all the events that ever happened to us in the past. Right? So, when you watch that film, you might say that the person or the social problem is an outcome of a convergence between two people trying to create a social reality that meets in harmony. So, for example, if domestic violence is a social problem that you see as something that is important, or child abuse, well, what's really happening from a symbolic perspective? From a phenomenological perspective, which is all the phenomena lead up, then in a domestic violence situation, all the phenomenology that shaped our interpretation of self and identity collides at this point in time. And in that collision, what you have is one self trying to assert power over the other self so that their definition of situation is real. Right? Pretty self-explanatory. Or domestic violence or child abuse, especially child abuse. We won't get into it. I don't like covering this in the live class. But A lot of times we spank our children. I don't. I've never had to touch my kids. I never will. Because, well, I know you're going to light me up on this one. But symbolically, what's happening when a parent spanks a child is they're sending a symbolic message to the child that they've done wrong, that they need to learn not to do this again. But what they've really done is they've tried to force this child to understand an adult perspective when they're coming in from a child perspective, right? In other words, it's trying to assert control over the symbolic exchange. So that's symbolic interaction. You can interpret whatever using symbolic interaction, right? Conflict theory. Conflict theory just basically assumes that the haves have power and the have-nots do not. That the have-nots, which are also known as the proletariats sell their labor to the haves, which is also known as the bourgeoisie, or the capitalist class. And the capitalist class controls the economic institution, the family institution, the education institution, the media institution, the political institution. So as long as the haves control the institutions, the have-nots always have to sell their labor to them. So the have-nots are always under the control of those who have wealth, right? Now when you read Dear Mama, you can't necessarily see that there's that kind of control, but you can definitely see the impact of social inequality and how it plays out, right? So if we take a look at the protests that are taking place now, who's protesting? Well, okay, you have whites and blacks protesting at the same time. Predominantly African American. I'm sorry, I'm looking at an error curve. Please try. What are you talking about? Racial divide, right? But you also have social class divide, because you're not seeing a lot of bourgeoisie out there. As a matter of fact, Trump and his staff decided to send the military in to stop the situation, right? Well, that is the upper class trying to control the lower class, the capitalist class controlling the bourgeoisie. If you see that as a perspective, then you're a conflict theorist. But if you see that it all ties together, I see the text. Oh, someone sent me a text based on something else not related to class. So, if we see this as a force that integrates and brings people together, that we need chaos to find out where there's breakdown so we can fix it and fix the institutions. If you see that crime and injustice are necessary so that we can fix what is broken in the system, right? Or anomie. Anomie is this idea that when there's massive social change within a system, there's going to be breakdown. And with that breakdown, people adapt. It tells us what's wrong with society. Well, if we take the functionalist perspective, then this breakdown is telling us what's broken. And it can bring us together, and it can lead us to fixing the social problems and the social ills. So, whatever social problem you take a look at, your interpretation is going to be based upon what theory you take. And what we're really doing is we're dismissing common sense. We're trying to question your common sense so that you can come up with a new methodology to approach and understand the world around you. Right? So if what you're trying to do is develop a theory that makes the most sense to you, you use the theory to formulate an interpretation. And you got to look the theories up, because usually we'd use a textbook and I could lecture on it, but why do that? All right? So you find the theory that is best for you, and then what you do with it is then you find the evidence to support it. And the evidence then aligns your argument, because most people in this world will use their opinion. They will not use empirical evidence. By the way, why is that important? Because as you go and you try to create for yourself a career, and you have a job, or you're in contact with someone who's going to ask you some questions, most people will answer a question with their current opinion. Stop it. Don't give your opinion. Tell your supervisor, is this the question that you asked me? Yes, it is. Will you give me some time to research and come up with the right answer, or an empirical answer to your question? And then you go formulate the question, develop your theory, go find data to support your theory, then you go present it to your boss in an analysis. So you come in and you say, here's what you asked, introduction. Here's what I looked up, background. Here's what I think is going on. Here's the data. Here's your solution. Do that. Try it once. And guess what's going to happen? Only 5% of the population will ever attain their ultimate dreams. And what does that 5% do? That 5% will do what other people won't. And no one's going to use an empirical argument to support their perspective. I beg you to do that, because I want you all to be great. I want you all to live your dream. I want you all to construct your dream around those things that you'd like to see happen in your lifetime. One way to do it is to be different, baby. You can't be the same. You got to be entrepreneurial. You got to take investment seriously. You got to build your team with people that trust you, edify you, and kick the rest out. And then the other thing that you have to do is you have to be a critical thinker. If you do those things and you do it repeatedly, and every day you take another step to become a better person, align your identity with yourself, and something magic is going to happen. You're going to wake up 20 years from now and still be younger than me and look back and say, you know what, that old fool who had a bald, shiny head online, he knew what he was talking about. You know why? Because I made all the mistakes. I've done well, but I made the mistakes. And I learn from my mistakes, and I try to pass them on to you. Last thing. When you take a look at a personal problem, C. Wright Mills also said that your personal problem is shaped by social problems, right? Because those social forces, institutional forces, that created the social problem are the same forces that created your personal ill. Think about that. We're institutional and historical beings. We're not just individuals. Whew, Lord. Have I talked enough? I hope that you are able to follow. I'm going to save this and upload this onto YouTube. Please feel free to ask questions. Your paper is due, the first paper that you're supposed to turn in yesterday is due tomorrow by midnight. It's an easy one. It's one page. 5 social problems. What's the connecting link? Then I'll write up a formal assignment for next Sunday, which is to watch a movie with the social problem in it. Or, alternatively, you can read the first section of Dear Mama, right, and write about that as what's the most important social problem. Because if you read that, you're going to be talking about the history of Reconstruction and Jim Crow in the South, which is perfectly fine. So you can use that book, or you can use a movie. I have started putting podcasts on YouTube from the book Dear Mama. I have the prologue, chapter 1 and 2, and chapter 3 are on there if you want to listen to it. It's not great, but I'm learning. And other than that, let me just say, I'm thoroughly enjoying you all. I'm having a great semester. I appreciate all that you've done. I hope you're not having a problem following me. I do wish we were in a live classroom setting, so hopefully this fall, when we go back live, I'm doing everything blended. One day live, one day online. I hope that you'll all join me, take my classes. I don't know what they are, you can look them up. But for now, I'm going to sign off. You know what we're up to, and I will be, Billboard, why I keep thinking Billboard? I will be providing you with information on Blackboard so that we can keep things moving forward. It's going to be a fast semester. I'm really proud of you. Feel free to text me. Feel free to call me. And I will talk to you soon. This is Shawn Schwaner signing off. The Hope Warrior.